Howdy. Now I was asked if I have CRPS 1 or I have CRPS 2. CRPS 1 is after a bone injury. CRPS 2 is after a nerve injury. The answer to the question is I have both. Now I will tell you quickly, hopefully, why that is. Way back in the days of yore, when I was 15 years old, I couldn't pee. I was like, why can't I not pee? Why is peeing and getting started peeing difficult? The reason is I had a spinal tumor about right here inside the spinal column, pressing on the nerves that control bladder function. Now, this is way back in the dark ages. So we're talking 1983, 1982. This started. So I was going to a chiropractor and getting my back cracked while I had that spinal tumor in there. And it was a slow growing, benign, thankfully, spinal tumor. And at one point, the chiropractor realized, well, I'm out of my depth here. This guy's back's like got inflammation on it, and he sent me to my family doctor. My family doctor put me on a tilt table and injected dye into my spinal column with a needle about yay big. Because I remember I made a mistake as a 15-year-old looking back and seeing this big ass needle with this greenish liquid in it, which was, some kind, it was probably some radioactive isotope type thing, like I just had with the bone scan about 8 months ago. But anyway, so I'm like Frankenstein on a table. I'm on this table, and they inject it, and then they tilt you on the table. And this is the pre-MRI days, so the dye doesn't go all the way through, and they're like, there's something in your spinal column blocking it. So this is 1984. I'm 16 years old. I'm lying. I'm getting like stomach spasms, like stomach muscle spasms. I remember that part of it. Urination was sort of a wish and pray and hope type of thing, you know. Um, I wasn't on a catheter yet or anything like that for it. But I'm waiting for my surgery, and the doctor says, rather bluntly to a 16-year-old terrified individual, you know, there's a chance that you could be a paraplegic, be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. There's a chance that you could be a quadriplegic. And with any surgery of this magnitude, there's a chance of death. And then he actually broke down the numbers. Actually gave me percentages. The point of that, I do not know. But I'll never forget that, listening to that. And I was getting a bunch of injections in my stomach like they used to do for rabies. But it was because my stomach muscles were all spasming and contracting, because the tumor was inside my spinal column, pressing on my spinal cord, doing all kind of harm to it. Now, ordinarily, like if I had an aunt that had a benign tumor that grew like to the size of an orange on her leg, and they cut it out, no biggie. The problem is, this is inside your spinal column. It's in between the bone and your central nervous system. So when it was growing, it has no place to go but to press on the spinal column, and that caused problems with my walking and coordination, and problems with urination, and then eventually the muscle spasms in the stomach and whatnot. So I go out, I come out of the surgery. The surgery's a raging success, and they're like, he'll be able to walk, which they weren't expecting me to be able to walk. And but we had to remove a vertebrae, so I have one less vertebrae than you do, and it's a big vertebrae, a lumbar thoracic vertebrae. It's like from around here. I'm not gonna like roll over and shit and show you, but you probably know that your lumbar ones are the ones that go, the big ones that are like behind your belly button. Your thoracic area is this area right here. So it was a lumbar thoracic vertebrae, and which like I said, I've always resented the fact that I should be 6'4" and not 6'1", because 6'4" in the '80s, that meant something. I was already a big dude at 6'1". But so it's a raging success. He's expecting me to thank him, but uh, I'm not in a thanking kind of mood because I'm just in misery, and I'm just miserable. You know, and they got me doped up on morphine, and I have a weird reaction to morphine where like I will take one of those Valium over there, it'll last. I take morphine and I wake up from it, and I'm like, when's my next morphine shot coming? You know, opiates are like that with me. Don't they don't last. I remember taking like Percocet, codeine. None of the stuff seems to last. It's like, take every 4 hours as needed. They're only good for like an hour and a half to 2 hours for me. So I'm miserable. This guy's name is Dr. Little. I remember that. He's a hotshot neurosurgeon in Cleveland Clinic, where I had the surgery done. And he's expecting me to, for some reason, he's expecting a 16-year-old kid to be mature enough to say, "Oh, thank God I can walk," or whatever, and I'm just miserable. All I can say is how miserable I am. And I remember there was like an inflammation, and they did the old-fashioned like railroad track um, looking stitches, so it left a nasty scar about, I don't know, about yay big. Like I said, I don't feel like putting on a show. I would if I had somebody here to help me with the camera, but it's just too difficult, and it won't show up without the proper lighting and all that anyway, since I'm Casper the Friendly Ghost, hue wise. Um, but I remember it being all swollen and stuff, and um, they were like worried about that. There's like a bunch of inflammation around, like I'm talking like that, like it made like laying on my back a little problematic. But I mean, like that along the incision. So they were worried about complications. Of course, the main complication I'm worried about is infection, but I had inflammation. And, they tested me for infection, and I was cool there as far as that was concerned. What wasn't cool is they had me on morphine for, I don't remember how many, it was at least a month I was in the hospital. But they had me on morphine for a good while, long enough to get me hooked, and then just dropped me off of it. And this and the stress of being a very sheltered 16-year-old, we just went through all this trauma, and we had a difficult family history, caused me to have a psychotic break, which I think they diagnosed as manic, as me being a manic depressive, which I'm not a manic depressive. But so I end up in a psych unit, and I'm going to physical therapy from a psych unit. And they did have an adolescent psych unit because I remember it was all kids. I remember some weird stuff from there, but I don't want to make this too long or too interesting for you, heaven forbid. But yeah, I grew up like in a Catholic background, so this is the way I remember it. I remember like sitting in a group of people, and there was like a girl that supposedly had anorexia. It didn't look like she had anorexia to me. She just looked hot. But there was another girl in there that had anorexia that looked like a skeleton. And there was like a bunch of kids there. And uh, one kid had fallen while doing the thing they used to make you do in um, gym class where you climb the rope, and had broken his neck. And his neck was like craned forward, like at a weird angle. So he was always looking at the ground. His name was Butchie. I kind of remember him. And there was another kid who was like a snobby little bastard that I had to share a room with, and he's like always like correcting me on my manners. He's like you eat. He's like close your mouth when you eat and stuff like that. You know, I just remember weird shit like that. Anyways, back to the Catholic upbringing and stuff. Um, when I had my psychotic break, and I recorded this in another video, I thought that I was getting possessed by the devil because I grew up Catholic, and the devil and demons and hell and all that stuff. You're taught that's like you know, you can shake their hands if you want to. You know, um, that's when I had my first encounter with the benzodiazepine, which is halcyon. And one of the side effects of halcyon is when you can get temporary paralysis for it. I just had a surgery where I was threatened with paralysis, so I wake up and I can't move, and I go completely petrified, terrified, and flash back to The Exorcist and start yelling out, "The power of Christ compels you," to try to drive whatever demon is keeping me from moving, because I had already been moving and stuff. And I'm like, the doctor said it was a success. Why can't I move? But it was really a weird side effect of the halcyon that I was given. I think to cope with um, uh, the morphine withdrawal that I was going through, and maybe probably to help me sleep or something. I don't know, or to calm my nerves down, or I don't know. But I would never take that again. But yeah, I already told that story somewhere else. So this is when I was 16 years old, and I apologize for my stomach if you can hear it growling. I don't like to eat in the morning. Um, so I go home and I gotta learn. Well, I'm already learning how to walk while I'm in the hospital, but I get my head together and I get out of there. I get out of the Cleveland Clinic, and it's 1984. I don't have to wear a back brace or anything, but I have to learn how to walk. And I remember there was a brief time where they put me on lithium for manic depression, which I didn't have, and lithium not a good drug for me. Worse cotton mouth. It give you the worst gorilla mouth than the purple Kush. But oh, I don't know. I never smoked purple Kush. I was trying to be creative. But anyways, it's a very long, complicated story. So to shorten it up a little bit, I get home and I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school. I've never wanted to go to school ever anyway. But now I'm like, they're gonna send me to school with my back all messed up, and I didn't want to go. And there was this guy named Parikh. That was this Indian guy, and he insisted that I go to school, which turned out to be a good thing. So that was when I went to a half a day of school on a quad cane when I was like 16, 17 years old. And they'd have a special bus pull up, and it had like a lift and stuff, and I could do the steps, but I was like, hey man, I go ahead and do the lift. I get like special treatment. I don't have to sit on the bus with the other animals, you know. And the bus will wait on me. I don't have the bus would not leave without me. I didn't have to catch the bus. The bus was catching me. So, you know, it's like if I got to walk with this freaking cane, I walk with this freaking cane. But I had already learned how to climb steps by then. And I could have just climbed into a school bus, and they probably would have reserved the front seat for me. But I would have been an outcast and set apart, regardless, one way or another, because of my walking wasn't very good, and I would have had it. It's, you know, I would have had to have some kind of cane of some kind. So you know how when you go to school when you're a teenager and you're like, oh my god, I got this pimple on my face. I gotta go to school with this pimple on my face. Yeah, try going to school with a quad cane and not walking normal. And we're like, you're a guy like me that's never fit anyway, and uh, never could figure it out socially anyway. So um, yeah, that was fun. Um, but I went for half a day. Okay, and connecting some of the stories um, from other videos is like that's when um, I was so like isolated and deprived that when I of human contact that when like I got around actual live uh, teenage girls and I'm 16 and I still got like all the hormones and stuff. That's my story of like the cheerleader that was I was in sitting in the back table at the very back of the room. That's the hottest cheerleader in the school was sitting like at the very back of the room, and I was the only guy behind her. And on Fridays before the football game, on Saturdays, the cheerleaders would all wear their cheerleader outfits, and that's my story about how she sat in the chair and didn't realize that her skirt was hiked up and I could see her whole ass, and I blew a load in my pants in school, first class of the day. For half a day, I got a cum stain on the front of my pants. So uh, which in retrospect, I finished the test early because it was test day, and she finished the test early, so I had like 20 minutes of staring at that. And I remember her name. Her name was Chris Oliver. I'm not gonna forget her name, right? So anyway, so I go to school for like half a day, and that was the last school that I did because the next year I had to do like a full day, which would have been the 11th grade, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't like navigate the hallways. The legs didn't work well enough, and at that point my spine was collapsing as well, and I was starting to get like this area right here was starting to get like a little touchy. It was getting like a little weird. It's like I kind of remember like being uncomfortable in shirts, but nothing dramatic. But my spine was collapsing, so I had to go to school like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, like all twisted up, and um, with it's called kyphoid scoliosis, where you have both the sideways bend to your spine and a forward curvature. So, but that was happening because they removed that vertebrae and then they didn't uh, give me a back brace or proper support. So that would have been a lawsuit right there if I was a litigious type person, or my parents were rather, because I was a minor at that point. So I remember throwing my books in the locker and like, can't do this. I was like, I can't do it. You know, it's hard enough being an outcast. It's hard enough, having the pimple on my face of kyphoid scoliosis. But I can't even keep up with walking with people in this hall. It's like I got people bumping into me in the hall, and I got social anxiety issues anyway. And I'm realizing that like I can't keep up with the traffic in the school in the school hallways and stuff. you know, and it's like I'm not going to fit in any kind of way. And I would have to be like, okay, we're going to have this outcast leave like 5 minutes early so he can navigate the hallways. And, leave and arrive in classes early. So, and, it's just more being an outcast and being different. I don't ever remember being made fun of, which is weird for being a hunchback. I don't ever remember being made fun of, except for by my family. I don't. The kids at school, they had their own worries. But anyways, I remember the day that where I realized I couldn't do it. I was just like threw my books in the locker when I got to school, locked it up, and then I walked home, which was about 4 miles, and crawled in my bedroom window and went to sleep. And they thought I was a missing person. And they were looking for me. Like the school called and he said he's not at school. We don't know where he is. Where is he? And I'm just sleeping, just laying in bed sleeping. And then they found me in bed sleeping. And I'm not sure exactly what happened after that. Um, hmm, yeah, not sure. But anyways, so there's your nerve damage for CRPS 1. Or no, that would be CRPS 2. I had both bone and nerve damage because I had a spinal vertebrae removed. There's your bone damage, and then I had my central nervous system impinged upon by a benign tumor. So there's your nerve damage. But that wasn't going to be the end of it. I had to get my spine reconstructed. And the first tumor surgery was in 1984, and the reconstruction was in 1986, in which I had bone trauma. Um, as far as nerve trauma, I don't know. If I had any nerve trauma or not during the reconstruction. I know they pulled that scar is in the one video. They pulled out a rib here, and then they did another incision on my hip that's about yay big, and they needed to take my own tissue, my own bone tissue, and this is in 1986. I don't know how they do things now, but they do a two-step procedure, and they cut along those old railroad tracks, and they put the newfangled stitches in there that leave less of a mark, and um, they took that bone tissue and they placed it along my spinal column, and they fused a part of my spine. But that was like the first step of the procedure. And there's a 10-day break between both surgeries, and I was in halo traction. That's with the screws in the head, you know, and it probably don't show up. It'd be a lot easier if you was just we were just sitting in a room together, or if I had a cameraman. Just I don't have no modesty left after all the shit I've been through. I don't got no modesty left. Um. Anyways, so chopped out the rib, chopped off some of my hip bone to use, because you want to use your own tissue because other people's tissue might get rejected. So I'm missing a rib now, and I'm missing a vertebrae, and a big one. So they put the bone pieces along the spine. They put you in halo traction for 10 days. At that point, I was 5'11", and they put me in halo traction for 10 days. And then they put something in called a Harrington rod, which is a metal rod, along the spine. I don't know if it's, they use the ossification process, it's called, where bone fuses to bone. And then they also put in the metal rod. It's kind of like it almost seems like a fail-safe measure, like a double measure. to me, but that's just the way they did it. But so I'm probably maybe the only person that you'll ever hear say that they had a screw driven in their head while they were awake. That's not a torture victim. And that grew 3 inches in height in 10 days because I went from 5'11" to 6'2" because of the halo traction. They straightened me out. And if you don't know about it, what a halo is, it's just a metal band, and that's why they call it a halo. And then they attach it with screws, and it's got a loop and then the loop is attached to an actual old-fashioned Nautilus pulley system, and it's just like a giant pulling on your hair the whole time, and you're just getting stretched out for 10 days. I think they also do some stuff in there. I seem to remember saying that they cut some, that they didn't, I don't remember the specific things, but they said they cut some stuff loose in there to help the stretching out process. So, the surgery went so well that they photographed me before and after for a medical journal. They didn't know it was going to go that well, but they said, you know, we got your before, now we want your after. Because I was like a trophy fish on a wall. Because it went so well and they did such a good job of straightening me out. But that is when I contracted full blown CRPS, and that is when I woke up after the second surgery, after they took the screws out and the halo traction out, and I had the metal rod in the spine and stuff, and I woke up. And the first thing I remember saying in intensive care was, you people were supposed to operate on my back. What the fuck did you do to my legs? Because my legs were on fire, and that's in the link, which I'll put in the description again. That's the burning neuropathic pain they talk about, and that's why I got that cool picture of a woman like that's on fire. I'll try to come up with a different picture of somebody on fire. Um, but yeah, I remember that. I remember like what did they do to my legs? Like what happened? And it was instantaneous. And um, this time before that surgery, I told them about how I got hooked on morphine and how I went out of my brain and stuff. And I'm like, I don't want no morphine. They said, well, that's what we use. You don't really have a choice in the matter, but we can give you methadone. Like a heroin addict. They didn't say like a heroin addict, of course, but gave you methadone and that'll wean you off of the morphine and you'll be all right. And they were right. That wasn't my problem. My problem was I was suddenly set on fire from the inside, and I didn't want nothing touching me. I wanted to lay there naked, and they were like, "You can't lay there naked. We can't have you do that." And I said, "I don't want nothing touching me." And so they put the bars up on the bed, the hospital bed, and they actually just put a sheet over top of me for a while, like I was an actual burn victim where they don't want anything touching the skin. And yeah, so I would say I have CRPS 1 and CRPS 2. Um, so, but me being me and me growing up like I grew up, um, I just say state things. I'm not like, oh my God, I'm on fire. I just say, look, something is wrong. My legs hurt. They shouldn't be hurting. Like, what the fuck's wrong with my legs? It feels like they're burning, and they're like, that's normal post-operative discomfort. Okay, now with CRPS, either kind, you got to catch it early. They could have caught that early. They could have done the nerve blocks early, and they could have knocked it in remission. But I'm just not that way. I'm stupid. I'm an alien creature. Okay? It's like, I don't act like normal people act. Normal people would be very strident and would carry on and carry on and carry on until they got help. But because the way I was raised, that didn't work in my household. So I just state the facts. The fact is my legs are on fire. and there's something, I do remember saying there's something different going on here. There's something weird going, this isn't normal. And they should have figured it out when I was like wanting to lay there naked with a catheter in my dick. Just lay there. They should have figured out, this dude's either out of his fucking mind or this isn't a normal post-operative discomfort we're talking about here. I do remember that I have a scar like right here, which I don't know, probably won't show up anyway, so I won't bother to show you, but they had a big drainage tube in me. I remember there was like a drainage tube. Um, I don't know what it was draining or what that was about, but I carry that scar. I carry the thoracotomy scar. I carry the halotraction scars. Carry the scars on my back. And the scar on my hip. And yeah. Um, so this is like, nobody was really like, unless you were a very curious neurologist. I would go to doctors, and once they figured out I had RSD and say the words RSD, and they would be like, "What's that?" And you're fucked when you go to a doctor and they want you to explain a disease to them, or you go to a hospital and the hospital says, "We have no case history of anybody with your ailment, so we can't treat you. Please leave." And we're going to send you to Cleveland Clinic. So by the time they caught it and diagnosed it, it was already too late. It had already, that feedback loop that's in the video of pain, where your brain interprets the injury as still occurring, and there's like the pain, I guess, is a result of a vascular spasming. It's like, and you get, I can't say the one word, but you get periods of cyanotic and erythematous areas of skin, and just think blue and red, because sometimes your feet will be cold and they'll turn purple, and sometimes they'll be bright red and hot as a fire engine. But since most people get it in an extremity like a hand or a foot, very few people get it from a spinal injury or get it in their back. That's fairly rare. So there was just a great deal of ignorance about it back in the 80s, to the point where I'm explaining what it is to doctors. So, uh, but they didn't catch it early. They didn't catch it early because I didn't. I was just raised not to. I was raised to say, look, here's the problem. You know, I was like, like it wasn't like my dad was like, don't be a whiny crybaby or stuff like that. It was just like a vibe I picked up on, that he didn't like that kind of thing. He liked you to take it like a man, you know, not and not like, you know, that would have been beneficial to me if I was like, "Ah," like screeching and crying and carrying on until, you know, they had to put me in restraints and do something, like try to figure something out. We get a neurological team in there and maybe they would have caught it early, but that's just not how I am. I do have this scar. I don't know if it'll show up, but it's a funny scar, like right here. It probably won't show up worth the shit. I think I got, eh, I don't know. I'd have to put my glasses on to see if it's showing up or not. Not, shit, see, I'm too white. My scar, you can kind of see it there. Stay lamp. I can't point to it. See that right there? It's kind of funny because it, it's like It looks like somebody's upper lip, and you can see like the stitches that went underneath there. When I was a little kid, I flew through a plate glass window. Not really a plate glass window. Okay, you had a screen door, and the screen door was locked. I didn't know it was locked. I was gonna run out the door, and it wasn't a screen door at that point. It was a glass door. So I hit the handle, just expecting to push it open, and just flew through the glass. And you know, that happened. It's about yay big. And I remember my dad holding me up, and he was like, I was like, oh, it looks like there's spaghetti in there, you know. It's all cut open, and you can see the white meat and everything. And I remember saying it looked like there was spaghetti in there because you can see fatty tissue and stuff. And he was like, oh, you'll be all right, you know. And he was like jovial about it. I remember he was like jovial about it. So, you know, we were just raised to be hard asses. That's all. You know, just take shit like that. Cause I'm a little kid and I was crying and stuff, but I was like, you know, I was just cooperating, and he was pulling it apart and looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, you're gonna need to go to get you some. We're gonna take you to the doctor. And he's very nice about it. He's like, we're gonna get you some stitches. You're gonna be all right. You know, meanwhile, the blood's running down into the sink. He's holding me up in the bathroom sink and taking a look at it and opening it up a little bit and stuff like that. You know, he always, his theory was, you know, that bleeding, um, a little bleeding, was actually better than stopping the bleeding. Yeah, let it bleed until it's cleaned out a little bit, and then you stop the bleeding. But anyways, so I don't catch the CRPS until, I don't remember when I got diagnosed. I remember the hospital that I got diagnosed was actually Akron General, and I told that in the last video, where it just so happened that there was an anesthesiologist there that they called in. Let me do this right. So I'm at home. I'm not recovering. I'm in a wretched, miserable state. I'm in a back brace, and it's like having broken ribs. So any coughing, any deep breaths even hurt. You know, I had no appetite. I barely weighed anything. Lucky to weigh 130 pounds at 6'2", and my feet were so painful to me. I disowned the left one. I considered it to be not my foot. I was like, if you want to wash that foot or touch that foot, that's fine. You know, so my mom was, you know, she was playing nurse to me and washing my feet and my lower legs and stuff, because they hurt so bad. I didn't want nothing to do with them. But then one day my left foot turned all black, and I was like, get me to a hospital. I'm like, you know, I don't know if I saw a movie about frostbite or something like that, but I'm like, yeah, get me to a hospital. It's like I would like to. I re-owned the foot. I was like, that is my foot, and we're gonna do something about this foot. I remember the ambulance driver, in the worst case of bedside manner ever, looking at my foot and saying word for word, the last time I saw a foot like that, they had to cut it off. He said that to me, which scared the living shit out of me. Yeah, I remember, I'm just a kid, man. I'm 18 years old and an inexperienced 18-year-old as far as the world. Very experienced and disappointed in pain and suffering. But yeah, he said that last time I saw a foot like that, they had to cut it off. I was like, oh, you must be related to the doctor that told me that I was going to be a paraplegic or quadriplegic or dead. I was like, is her name Little? Anyways, they realized that I was using the ambulance for transportation because of that it wasn't like, get this guy to a hospital quick or he's going to die. So they drove through a Hardee's drive-through in an ambulance, and they asked me if I wanted anything to eat or drink. I love that, man. Ambulance going through. Ambulance with somebody with a patient in it going through a drive-through. Because they realized they were just being used as a taxi service because it would have been very uncomfortable for me to be in a car. And so they drove me to Akron General. Akron General had the anesthesiologist that had seen uh, RSD, is what they called it at the time. There was no CRPS 1 and CRPS 2. They just called the whole disease RSD. And he said, there's a test that we can do, but I think I've seen something like this before. And I don't know if anesthesiologists are like free agents or whatever, but he was hired on new to the hospital. But they did a thermographic study of me, and they said, yeah, this is presenting as RSD. That's the first time I heard that acronym. And then they told me they have no case history in the hospital and that you need to go. And I went to Cleveland Clinic. The problem is, man, I can't get the years right. I didn't get the nerve block, I think, done to it for like, yeah, I can't get the years right. You have to forgive me. Um, I know I was living at my sister's house when I got the nerve blocks, but um, if they hit you with the nerve blocks, and what they do is they blast a bunch of lidocaine and novocaine into the ganglionic nerves clusters along your spine, and sometimes that knocks what they call RSD, what they call CRPS now, into remission, because it can go into remission. It's never gone into remission for me ever, but it can go into remission. So by the time they did that, I had already had it for, I would say, anywhere from, I'm trying to remember, but it was anywhere from a year to 3 years. That's how, I don't really remember, you know. I remember I was living with my sister and I had already moved out of my house because me and my dad were going to kill each other. So I probably had it for 2 years because me and my dad were going to kill each other when I was 20. It's the first time that I stood up to him because I knew he had killed people and had a volatile temper. And, I never really got in his face about anything because I wanted to live. I also seen him do ridiculous feats of strength, and I knew that I was no match for him. But that's the first time that I discovered the crazy place. The place that will make you throw uh, your landlord out of his own building, that will make you pick up a machete, that will make you walk up to some guy that outweighs you by 50 pounds and look him in the eye and be like, it's me or you, son. It's like only one of us is walking out of here. You might crawl out of here if you're lucky. That's the first time I discovered that there was some other Steve that wasn't like, you know, completely. I always had a history of fighting, but that's the first time that I realized there was a don't give a fuck Steve in there, like me or you, blood on the floor. It's gonna be yours or it's gonna be mine, and this is not a game we're gonna play. This isn't Marcus of Queensberry rules. This is life and death. But anyways, that was when I was 20, and I stood up to my dad, and then I passed out thousands upon thousands of this cheap ass newspaper to save enough money to move into my sister's house to get away from my dad so we wouldn't kill each other. I would have got killed. I'm not kidding. I remember, man, yelling in his face, pushing my sister and her baby out of the way, and knocking them across the room. That's how crazy I was. They landed safely in a chair, thank God. And I remember saying, "You're a mean son of a bitch," and just getting in his face. And I don't remember what else I said. And him just sitting there, been through that situation a billion times, just cool as a cucumber, just looking at me with a look of surprise. And then his eyes got a different look in it. And he said, "Don't push your luck." And I wasn't stopping, that didn't stop me. But later on, I thought about that and I was like, wow, you know, like that is a different kind of animal than I am altogether. That is a cold, cold reptilian type of violent. That's the violent that he used to always say that no matter how long it took him, he got anybody back. It might, he said, it might take me a week, it might take me a month, it might take me a year, it might take me 5 years. But he said nobody has ever done anything to me where I didn't get him back and pay him back for it. That's a whole nother type of person than me. I'm hot blooded. That's cold blooded. I remember he said that. He's like, "Don't push your luck." And I doubt his heart rate, even like Hannibal Lecter. His heart rate never exceeded 78 beats per minute. Whoever, Dr. Chilton, or whoever that line is where he bit the nurse's face or whatever. You know. Anyways, so I knew I had to get the fuck out of here. I get the fuck out of there. I knew I didn't have any money, and my legs worked at that point. I had taught myself to walk for the second time, and so I just walked all over the place, which was very good for my CRPS probably, which was then called RSD, and this is the year of 1987, 88. I think I moved in with my sister in late 1989. It's probably when I had the nerve blocks. So like 2.5 years after I actually contracted the disease. So all it did was get me high on a motherfucker. Which leads me to the other story that I told on here about they did a before and after thermographic study of my whole body, but you got to be buck naked for it. And then they have you stand on a line and you're just naked there. And I did it before, and they did a thermographic study because it's as it says in the video, it's a treatment and a diagnostic tool. And then they did the nerve blocks, and they had me, and I was high. I felt so good, you know. And it's like I was looking at my dick on the thermographic thing, and it was a lot bigger than it was, and a lot uh, lighter colored, meaning it was getting more blood flow and stuff like that. And I'm, some 18, no, it would be 20. I was some 20-year-old dude. And of course, it was an attractive woman in the room with me, and they dimmed the lights for modesty's sake. But I told that story on here before. It's like I to this day I don't know how I didn't get a boner. I have no idea. And but I was sitting there and I was fighting it the whole time, being a decent human being. But then I was like, it's a much better story if I would have popped wood and then turned sideways and then looked at it. That would have been my only chance to see what my heart on would look like thermographically. I don't have access to that equipment. I wonder if any like fucking technicians and shit like you know did like a shit, man, like a Kinsey type of thing, It's just went in there and did that, you know. This is my boner on drugs. This is my boner off of drugs. Or how that old commercial goes where this is your brain on drugs, and then they throw the egg in the frying pan. I almost had a good association there. I didn't quite make it. Anyways, that tied into that story. And all those nerve blocks did was nothing. It made me feel great for like 12 to 24 hours. It made me all horny as fuck. And I still remember she was a redhead. They dimmed the lights, but they couldn't dim them all the way. And she was sitting not too far away. And I was like, first thing you need to do is not look at her. But yeah, that was weird. I mean, and I wanted to look at, I did look at the computer monitor that they had. And I did look at, like, you know, the areas and how, like, the darker areas are the areas that are getting less blood, and the lighter the areas, you know, getting more blood. So my dick went from purple to yellow red. So thermographically. So, um, so that was part of that story. Um, let's see. After that, that's the only nerve blocks I had. And I don't know. I'm just after that I was like, fuck doctors. Doctors did this to me. It's just, I realized that this is an incurable disease, and that they tried the opioid analgesics, which basically means they can dope you out of your skull and get you hooked on something. Um, or they can do all kind of radical, crazy attempts at fixing you that might make you worse. Or I can figure out some way to have a life with it. And that was my choices, and I chose to just. I didn't go to a doctor except for an emergency room. I didn't have anytime I go to the emergency room, they asked me if I had a family doctor. I was like, no. The last family doctor I had and this might be an interesting digression, is I had a harmless ganglionic cyst on my foot that looked like a second ankle bone, but I didn't know what it was. And I was like, maybe it's a benign tumor or something that needs to cut out or whatever. But the motherfucker sent me to a hand and arm orthopedist for something wrong with my foot. So the guy's like, didn't you read the sign when you came in the door? And I said, I do have an appointment today, right? And he goes, yeah, but I'm a hand, arm, shoulder guy. You got something on your foot. And I was like, well, my doctor must be pretty much an idiot then, huh? And he just likes to laugh because doctors got, the blue shield thing going. Like with cops, it's like doctors, generally speaking, don't speak bad about other doctors. But he just laughed. And then that was the last family doctor. I was like, I'm never going to that guy again. I'm never going to that guy again. And then he wanted to have me do some kind of unnecessary. He was always padding the bill and doing unnecessary tests and stuff too. His name was Dr. Simon. And that was my childhood doctor. He's the guy that actually diagnosed the tumor when I was 15 or 16, or they did the surgery when I was 16. They might have diagnosed it when I was 15 though. But he was my pediatrician. And then I was like, the medical community are quits here for a good 20 years or so. And I just would go to the emergency room if I screwed up too bad. If I got sick, I got sick. I wrote it out, and I just lived the best I could, and um, was pretty much like a super athlete, because that was my way of dealing with CRPS was exercise, exercise, and more exercise. So my resting heart rate was probably high 60s. I remember this was a 17-year-old kid, my nephew, and I took him on a bike ride that had a whole bunch of hills and stuff, and he's acting like a jerk, and I'm like, well, you want to act like a jerk? I can act like a jerk too. And I rode him into the ground, literally. Like, I was like, we're gonna go a little bit further down this road here, and this is in the Canton South uh, area, down a road they call 800, And you can even look up the streets. Duber, Battlesburg. I took them all the way down to Battlesburg, and all the way back up past the Timken plant, all the way back to where I lived in Southwest Canton. And he sat on the couch and immediately passed out. And I was like, that's what you get, little man. You don't disrespect your elders. And he told me later, we talked about that. He said during that bike ride, he was like, just head toward the light, just head toward the light. He's like, he didn't want me to leave him out there. I don't know. He wasn't probably 17. He was probably like, I don't know. I think he was. I don't know. He could have been anywhere from 15 to 17 years old. But he was like, that's what I remember him saying. He said, I was on that bike ride. I was like, just head toward the light, just head toward the light. I guess a reference to death. Um, but that's how I dealt with it. Is like that's how I dealt with the pain and everything. And yeah, so that's about an hour. Uh, but of course, I've led a very unusual life. Unfortunately for me, I lost an inch because of the CRPS. Because after they straightened me up, made me 6'2", which I might have even been 6'5" if they wouldn't have pulled out that vertebrae, because a lumbar thoracic vertebrae. So man, and I had big people in my family, like my cousin who played for Ohio State Buckeyes and was in the running for the Outland Trophy, won Kirk Barton. I had uh, my genetics was for big people, big, angry, antisocial, dangerous people. That's what I come from. But because I had the CRPS and all the pain and stuff, and then like I settled an inch, so I lost an inch. So I'm only 6'1", whereas I should be 6'2". But I'm not talking about like with age. You know how people get shorter with age. I'm talking about I settled an inch over a period of a few years into my 20s because the CRPS had me so messed up. And believe it or not, there is so much more to that this was a short version of it with a few digressions thrown in there for humor's sake. I mean, you gotta have a little comic relief, like trying to kill your nephew for. I think he shook up a can of pop and sprayed me with a can of pop when we were already like a good 5, 6 miles away from home. And I was like, man, you're gonna make you wish you didn't do that. we had like sodas, and he shook up a soda and thought it was funny. Sprayed me with a sticky root beer. I do remember that was the thing that made me like you're gonna have a day you're gonna remember now. The old evil streak come out a little bit, but I wasn't gonna hurt no. I wasn't gonna hurt him or nothing like that. But as far as like my 20s, yeah, I was pretty much out to lunch from my whole 20s, from what happened in my teens, and from you know, realizing that I had an incurable, pain generating neurological disease, and I was going to have it for the rest of my life. And you realize that when you're right around 20 years old, it's going to make you a little bit nuts and a little bit dangerous. Um, since my dad helped me access the part of me that, mm, yeah, part of me that's come out a few times since I've been living here, and the part that Gerald saw in the hallway on a June 14th of this year. The part of me that literally made me stand in the hallway and call out the whole building. Anybody that wants to come down, let's go. I shouldn't say the whole building. I should say the whole upstairs, because the Roy guy in a wheelchair, he's been here for a long time. But it was always very strange to me because of my dad being like this dominant, like, um, I would call him psychopathic because, kill people, put people in the hospital. Some people might call him a borderline personality, you know. Um, but he definitely wasn't all there. Like he wasn't a rational type of person, but he was dangerous. You got a domineering father like that, it's gonna make you walk on them eggshells, and it gets to be such a habit. You're doing it around people that won't cut your throat. You know, like my dad would never. He would never done that to me. I actually think he loved his kids. He just could only love them within his own um, messed up, crazy mental framework. You know, he never told me he loved me ever, but my mom told me that he said, "Why don't you tell your kids? Why don't you at least tell your kids that you love them?" And he said, "They know I love them. I go to work and feed them, don't I?" You know, but I always felt like I was like a renter that wasn't welcome. I knew that was my house. I knew I wasn't going to get kicked out, but at the same time, I felt like I wasn't entirely wanted there. Like I was an inconvenience. Um, it, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I knew that I had. A lot of kids don't know that, but I knew that I had a place to go, and I knew I was going to have food in my belly. And I also knew that a lot of his um, brothers, so much worse than he was. Um, and I knew that they grew up not knowing if they were going to eat and not knowing if they were going to just get thrown out and thrown out on the street. And I always had that security of knowing that I was going to get food and I was going to get shelter. I didn't know if I was going to get my ass beat or possibly he would lose his temper. I can tell a quick story since this is a long one where I saved the boat guy. I always call him, but I saved him from I don't know what. But he kept hunting dogs, and one of the dogs got tangled up and couldn't get back in his box and froze to death. And he blamed my foster brother for that. And he was, I remember him saying, "Have you no compassion?" I knew he was in some, because my foster brother, boat guy, he was denied. But I heard this big noise, and I come down from upstairs. And when I come down from upstairs, my dad was cocked and ready to go. And he had so much rage and temper in him that I don't know what would have happened. But I come down there, and he was cocked and ready to go. And he looked at me, and instead of blasting the boat guy in the face, he hit the cupboard because the cupboard was open and just knocked the cupboard like off its hinges. Just poof, and it was solidly built. And I was like, man, that was a pulled punch too. That wasn't the full force. I was like, man, if he would have hit him full force, he might be dead. He definitely would have be in the hospital getting his nose reconstructed or his jaw wired or something. But yeah, so that made me a timid soul. So when it was weird to discover that somewhere deep within me, I wasn't a coward. That I was, I always thought of myself as a coward, like as like you know, a scaredy cat type of person. I would fight. I like to fight, but you'd have to piss me off, in an everyday way. It's like I would just put up with people, like, making fun of me and stuff like that. I didn't act like no tough guy or nothing like that, but if I was pushed past the point, I'd pick you up and throw you over the hood of a car and watch you slide down and wonder if your back was broken. I would beat you senseless. I mean, but I would have to be provoked. I always thought of myself as a coward. I thought of myself as a coward the day that I threw my books in the locker and walked home from high school and said, "That's it, no more high school for me." and they just diagnosed me as crazy, you know. Um, I mean, I was seeing psychologists as a kid, and it's just kind of silly. The whole process to me was kind of silly because it's like, even as a kid, I'm like, I'm coming in here and I'm talking to this lady, and Omerta, code of silence. You think I'm going to talk about what was really going on in my household to this lady and risk my ass to somebody that I know uh, cut somebody and watch their intestines come out? So the story goes. You think I'm going to do that? So it was really pointless, you know. They would just remove me from the home and put me through more trauma or whatever, you know. Like I'm going to say, like, I'm afraid of my dad because, like, he sharpens knives a lot. Talks about cutting people, and I've heard the same story told from several sources that he slit somebody's stomach open right across the middle. And I remember his knife was like down to a needle point, and then he said the knife wasn't sharp until you could shave with it. And you know, I heard that from a lot of people that he did that. And I was like, well, I wonder, you know, what else he did. And then I would hear other stories about things that he did, and I, of course, told the story on here of how I was hanging around this guy's daughters because they were gorgeous. And he just knew I was just hanging around, just another dude trying to bang his daughters. So he treated me like shit until he found out. He's like, "Your name's Barton? Uh, is I guess should I protect his anonymity? I don't know." But anyways, and for penny and for pound, my dad's name was Paul. His first son was Paul Jr. But everybody called him Pete. Nobody knew why. Dad's name was Pete Barton. They used to call him Peter Rabbit because he was fast. He was fast with that knife and fast on his feet. And speed kills, son. You take a strong guy and you take a fast guy. Put your money on the fast guy. And so, anyways, yeah, that's when I realized that every story that I ever heard about him was true. Is because there was this guy that was treating me like shit because I was hanging around his house wanting to bang his daughters. One of his daughters referred to me by my last name. He goes like, "Your name." He never even would speak. He just looked at me like he wanted to pick me up and throw me out of his house for distance. But he was like, "Your name's Barton." He goes, "Yeah." He says, "You know Pete Barton?" I goes, "Yeah, that's my dad." "Hey man, would you like a Coke?" Or "I got Coke, I got Pepsi." And he starts being real nice to me. And then I went home and I asked my dad about it. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I know him." He's like, one night outside the Palms, um, my brother Pat was kicking the shit out of one of his uh, biker buddies. And he was wanting to step in. And I put my knife along his stomach. And I said, "You take one more step to, toward what's going on out there, I'm going to open you up like a ripe watermelon." And I'm like, then it all sank in, you know. It's like all that shit that I've been hearing. I'm banging my glasses on my leg nervously for some reason. All that stuff I've been hearing is true. My dad is actually a killer. My dad is actually, uh, the stories about him. I knew he had a crazy temper. You know, you could feel the violence and rage in him. But all the stories that I heard about him putting people in the hospital, and the murder story I heard, and it's like all that stuff's true. You know, like, you know, it's sort of like you hear something and then you feel it when you know it's true. Then I knew it was true. Oh, I'm living in the house with yeah, I'm living in the house with that. Shit, man, I had a good thought to throw in there. Oh, man, I wish it would come back to me. I get distracted. Damn it. But yeah, you can say I haven't had a normal life. See, that thought will come back to me about that. But, well, there was a story I told on there before about him just trashing a guy for absolutely no reason at all, just because he felt like it, because he was swearing in front of my his sister, my aunt, because a pop machine was ripping this guy off at a gas station. He's like, "You don't talk that way in front of a lady." And then the guy said something back to him because he didn't have those good instincts that I'm talking about, in other videos. And my aunt, no stranger to violence herself, just shook his head, and he's like, you could see that she could still see the image of the guy laying there in a pool of blood. And he said, then we just left. And she said, I heard those words every day of my life. And he said he was just in a bad mood. Now, my other aunt, who is no longer with us, said that my dad was the meanest person that she had ever seen. And you got to remember that her other brother was a serial killer. And y'all got to remember also that the serial killer and the leg breaker that was in the family, the guy who took the baseball bat, or the little league baseball bat, and put it up his sleeve, and they hospitalized the guy, and they went in there and told him, like, you mention our names to anybody, that's it for you. You're 6 foot under. They went into the hospital where the guy was all like in his cast and traction and everything for being beat up with a little league baseball bat. It's like, they went immediately as soon as they could. They paid him a visit, like mafioso shit, and said that omerta, keep them lips closed, or down you go. But those guys were afraid of my dad. They would not come around the house. He made it very clear to them, if you come around the house, that's the last thing you're going to do. So he protected us from them. So there's other stories that I could tell, of course, that I'm not at liberty to, where those two were trying to involve other family members in crime, but I never even saw the serial killer guy face to face in person. I only saw the leg breaker guy when he went to visit my dad. When my dad had a heart attack, I was in the hospital sitting next to the bed, and he came in there, and I told that story before. He looked like a refugee from the 70s with a big wide collared shirt and the gold chains, and you could almost see him in a disco, going to the disco after he's visiting my dad in the hospital in probably the late 90s. That's the only time I seen him. So, um, yeah, it was very strange of me or very strange for me to discover that I had that in me, like that same capacity for violence, because I always thought of myself as a coward. It's like, yeah, I could fight. My brother taught me how to box. I've told that story on here before. Until I split his lip, and he looked at me like like, this was your idea. It's your fault for being a good teacher. And now you're gonna like do the Bruce Lee thing and look at the blood that I spilled out of you, and then look at me like you want to kill me. It's like, I ain't boxing you no more. I'm 15 years old, 14 or 15. Before I probably I already had that spinal tumor, and he teach me how to box and shit. And I figured out how to feint and fool people. And I fooled him. And I dropped the right on him and split his lip. And he did this. And it's just like Bruce Lee, man, except for he didn't taste it. He was like, he looked at it, and he looked at me, and he said, I think we're done now. Never boxed him again. Fuck that. Even at that age, I knew what that look meant. That look meant like, like to swing on you right now, but you're like this tall, and if I did, probably get in trouble with the old man. You know, the old man. I wish I had a blade or something to demonstrate how he used to do that and use this pen. Imagine this pen as a pocket knife. Open, open, open. Snap. You couldn't snap your fingers as fast as that guy could open a knife. And he ground it down to like a needle point, like I said. And the way he could do that is, say this black part is the blade. He kept this part of the knife dull, so he could hit his thumb on that part. And the only part that needed to be sharp was like a inch and a half, 2 inches long, and it was down to a needle point for stabbing, and the razor sharp for cutting. And I heard those stories. I watched him sharpen knives, almost like a religious ritual. I heard those stories from when I was a little kid. Heard the stories about how he was approached in the park by three black guys, which they probably were up to no good. I mean, why else would they be approaching a guy 3-on-1 in a park at night? Guy's minding his own business, but he's like, I cut one, I cut the second one. This is how fast this guy was. The third one, I took a swing at him, but he was already running, and the other guy ran this way, and I chased one of them down. And he said, I couldn't catch him though. He said, I cannot believe, and he said it just as casually as talking about the weather. He's like, I can't believe that somebody could run that fast while they were holding their stomach. And he might have used the phrase holding their guts in, but but I don't remember. I just remember, you hear, I heard the story a few times, but you know how you gotta swing your arms when you run. Like, how can you be like holding your stomach and run that fast? You know, I don't think I asked him why he was chasing somebody that was running away from him, but I kind of think I knew. No witnesses. But what about the other two guys? So I really don't know why he was chasing that guy. I don't know. These are not things that keep me up at night anymore. This is all ancient news. I don't know how I got into the violent stuff, but it's just, it's just part of me. I just, you know, I can't help that stuff. I was recounting that story that I told where everybody was sitting around. I just told this to somebody yesterday, but everybody was sitting around and having a good time smoking my weed. And there's like 6 or 7 dudes there. And they all understood who I was or what I came from, except for the one guy. The one guy liked my weed, but I already got all these people leeching on my weed and smoking my weed anyways. I'm being generous, and this guy's like, sell me a joint, man. Sell me a joint. He just kept on me. I'm like, no, I don't want to sell you a joint. He's like, come on, man. He just kept on and he kept on. And I'm like, okay. And I rolled him a joint and gave it to him. And he's like, you're going to charge me $3 for this little fucking toothpick? Are you really going to do that? He's like, I could pick my teeth with this thing. And then he just kept on. He wouldn't let it go. At first I was calm. I was like, look, man, I didn't want to sell you anything. You're lucky you got that. I was like, I didn't want to sell you anything. Everybody's still laughing and joking and having a good time. And then he pushed it too far and he said, thing. And I stood up and I said, you say one more goddamn word, I'm going to come over there and I'm going to punch you in your fucking head. And the place got dead quiet. And this is a guy that didn't know how to keep his mouth shut. But he understood because he had instincts. He understood what was coming next. Everybody in that room understood what was coming next. He said, okay, man. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just looked down and said, okay, man. He said it quiet. I sat back down, and it was quiet and uncomfortable, and then everybody kind of, you know, talk about a buzzkill. I would have trashed everything in my house, including, I had like that small shitty apartment. I would have trashed everything in the house, but mainly him. But he understood. He might have heard stories about me from um, the boat guy because they were tight. So he might have not been an instinctual thing, but you come that close, and sometimes I could stop. Sometimes I couldn't stop. It depended. If you hurt me, I couldn't stop. But um, I remember the boat guy. I was just telling the story yesterday. I remember the boat guy punched me in the throat. He was very inaccurate. First of all, I don't know what he was swinging on me for anyway. Just stupid plan. But he punched me in the throat. And I know how to throw a punch. You throw a punch from it comes up from the floor. And you turn as you throw it. You use your hip and you turn into it. So, he hit me in the throat and I hit him with a full right hand. It was in the kitchen. And down goes Frazier. And my mom's like, stop, stop, And my dad's like, no, 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 let him go, let him go. He wanted to see what would happen next. And as far as I was concerned, because I wasn't in that place, that bad, bad place, it was over. It was like, you hit me, I hit you. We're done. Because I didn't have time to get into the real, like what would have happened with the dude with the joint. Would have been ugly. There would have been guys pulling me off of him, depending upon how much they liked him. If they wanted to fight me too. Um, this always sounds silly when a sick old man is talking tough, don't it? Don't it? This is just how the way things were, though. You know. And after all, you can ask Gerald. I give you his phone number. You can ask Gerald about what my temper's like. If I'm lying to y'all, if I'm exaggerating any of this shit, I'm holding back shit. I ain't exaggerating none of this. I gotta hold back because all of it cannot be told. The names have been changed to protect my friends who are not innocent. I couldn't say the names have been changed to protect the innocent. They're just my friends. You just can't go around putting all your business out there. You know. And as soon as I said that about my cousin playing for Ohio State, and his first name being Kirk, anybody could figure out, you know, Kirk Barton. He's a famous player, made the NFL. All you have to do is look up famous. I even said he was a lineman, 325, 6 foot, God, 6'6", 6'8". I don't know, gigantic motherfucker. But all you have to do is a little research. I did, as Jamie Two Rock slip up in a video when I was reading one of those texts to Cass. I said, "Hello, this is Stephen Barton." I did say my last name, and then the Jamie Two Rocks guy was like, "I can't believe you slipped up and said your last name." I was like, "Man, fuck you. You know what? You want to come, do whatever. Come get it. Anybody wants to come here, come get it." My dad had an expression: "You might get the whole sandwich, but I'm gonna get a bite." Now that's a contradictory statement, but what that meant, of course, the sandwich is you might win the fight, but I'm gonna get a bite. It's like I'm gonna take a piece out of you. I'm gonna take a piece out of your hide. I'm take a piece out of you, your soul. You're never gonna forget me. And so fuck this anonymity shit. You know, that's done. It's over. I don't tell shit on here because I got respect for other family members that I can't tell you the really bad stuff. I can only tell you some stuff. Now I'm angry. I'm just angry thinking about that guy writing my name down. I'm angry now. I want to fight somebody. Like I could do that. Well, so I had some shit happen. I can't talk about, like 2 days ago, where I'm getting like a phone call. I can't talk about. I can't talk about everything on here, man. I wish I could. They're interesting stories, but I still got some anger left over from that. You know. But yeah, you come here and you kill me, you're gonna be putting me out of my misery and doing me a favor, since I got CRPS type 1 and type 2 from here down. But you come here and you don't come here and you don't put a ski mask on, or you don't snipe me and you face me, a little piece of you is coming with me. You might take me out. It's just the way it is, man. I, I don't know why I'm just going here just because of something that happened 2 days ago. I'm not angry. I'm still angry at the Jamie Two Rock weirdo guy that for printing my name out in print, because that's just one video where I slip up and say my name. But I already knew it already, that if any maniacs or whatever wanted to that guy's a fucking famous guy, Kirk Barton. Let's see, Kirk Barton. His dad's my uncle. My uncle, and they could just, it's a simple thing. I knew when I was saying that, if somebody wanted to be a malicious asshole, they could be a malicious asshole. I already knew that. Honestly, when I was reading the text, I was just reading the text. I honestly didn't know that I just said my name outright. I had already assumed that since I talked about uh, a famous football player for one of the most famous colleges, and a guy that was like an All-American, um, you know, played in the NFL type dude, that you just track it down. And plus, I told you the guy, this is like going way back, but I told you that the guy was, there was a YouTube video of him, and he's getting, for assaulting a Delaware County um, police officer, which I guess they called the part where he slammed the guy's arm in the door, the assault part, because after that he just got tased and tased and tased, and he was still trying to resist being tased after the third time. They were just like, hit him again, you know. And I was like, yeah, you better tase him. You better tase him. I know where he comes from. Um, or the clan that he's a part of. Yeah. Anyways, that wasn't even supposed to go there, but spontaneity, hey man. Sometimes that makes things interesting. And like I said, it's just spillover from something that happened a couple of days ago. I can't talk about. Um, but really, the reason why I got on here, besides my usual uh, wanting to talk a little bit thing. It is morning, as you can tell by the light in the window, and it is 8:58, and I have been talking for an hour and a half, and was just, I kind of answered that question flippantly. I have respect for that guy, so he asked me that question, and I said, well, I went to pain management, like, I don't know, trying to get help with the CRPS, and they were like, well, I'm not so sure you have CRPS because they had primitive diagnostic tools back in the 80s. You know, hey man, if it looks like a cat and it smells like a cat, you know, it's like, but that's not the way doctors work. So he put me through this bone scan thing, and he said, I said, well, what I thought that was the whole point of our appointment, but I finally had to ask him, what did the bone scan say about me having CRPS? He said it was inconclusive. So, the guy asked me if I had CRPS type 1 or type 2, and I said, oh, well, as far as they're concerned, I have inconclusive type 1 or inconclusive type 2. Because as far as the medical community, or that pain management arm of the Altman group that I go to, like my doctor's an Altman guy, and then he sends me to Altman hospital and Altman medical facilities and Altman doctors, and their gang. they're part of the they're part of the medical mafia, and so the guy's he's just giving me gabapentin, and I'm like, man, fuck this, I can get gabapentin. I got a prescription waiting on Monday for it. I can get gabapentin off my regular doctor. I'm not going to see this guy. I'll go see somebody else, somebody that actually believes. I can't believe that the guy's, after 33 years. This is CRPS though. This is, it's the nature of the beast, because it's a rare disease and it presents in so many different ways. Like you get disbelieved with it, and people not believing me has been sort of a life theme of mine, because I said I had pain in my legs, and they said I had growing pains. I said these pains are pretty bad, and they said, well, growing pains will be pretty bad. No, it wasn't growing pains. It was a tumor growing pains. That's a little bit different than what they're talking about when they say that you're just going to be a big dude, so you got growing pains. But that was just me and the way I was raised. I was just like, look, this hurts. Or like, look, I'm bleeding. Look, you know, you know, that's just because I was raised like that. And it's cost me very dearly not being an emotional type person, because that is how people are when they hurt. It's like, even when I was a little kid, man, and they put that funky scar, which I always thought was cool. Let's see if I can get that again. It's right there, so you can't see it because I'm so white, but it looks like a lip. It just looks like lips, It looks like a big full bottom lip or something. And then you can see the stitch marks underneath it. I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches, and some stitches on top of it too. But even then, I'm a little kid. I'm so little that, you know how tall like doors are, and you have like the screen part of your screen door, and then it's got like a two part. Well, the screen was up top, and the glass part was the bottom part. So I was so small when that happened that I flew through the glass, and I have a scar that I can't show you also where I got cut. That's right here where I had two cuts on me. I got two scars left on me from that. And I was actually fairly calm even as a little child. I wasn't in hysterics or nothing like that. I do remember saying, it looks like spaghetti. And I was crying, of course. But you gotta understand, I was probably 5, you know. Because, I mean, how tall was I that I could fly through the glass on a bottom screen, on the bottom part of a screen door? I mean, how tall is that? It can't be. You know, I don't know what age I was, but I was like that even then. And that cost me because so-called, we won't call them normal people. We'll call them the average person behaves differently because they're not raised around what I was raised around or saw the things that I saw. Um, so I guess besides me explaining that I have CRPS part type 1 and 2 because I've had trauma done to both nerve and bone, the takeaway from this is like cry like a bitch if you need to, man. But if you're hurting, let them know you're hurting. Carry on. Hell, man, I've done it before. Where I think I even said that, man. I'm gonna fucking Meryl Streep my way into this, man. I'm gonna, you know, and I'll do that. Sometimes I was like, I'm not a good actor. You know, I'm, I'm, I'm just not good at it. But I'll be like, oh, like I did that when I was having all that anxiety, and no, I okay. That's when I did that. Was 2 Januaries ago when I wanted to go and get put in a psychiatric unit for two reasons. It's like I ran. This was after my sister crushed my soul, and I used up. I was facing cold turkey, and I was like, um, cold turkey off of Xanax. Okay, I kind of had a little taste of that. Kind of know what that's about, and like, yeah, I kind of want to live. So I also had the plan in my head previously about like I'm gonna go in there and let them see me, get help for the CRPS because it was starting to overwhelm me because stress and emotional stuff and family stuff. It just it's like uh, a match on gasoline. It's fuel to the fire, to the neuropathic fire. And so yeah, I acted. I was like. I acted like I was suicidal. I was actually not suicidal. I was the opposite of suicidal. I was going in there to get help, to try to live. But I was like, I don't want to live anymore. And they're like, you've been having suicidal thoughts. And I said, well, I don't want to live like this. And they were like, well, if you were going to do it, how would you do it? And I said, well, I don't keep a gun in the house, so I'd probably hang myself. And I was like acting the whole thing. I had a whole script written out in my head, and I was like acting the part and everything, and they bought it. And it probably didn't take much convincing, because the medicine is a racket. I'm just another guy they can get some money out of. So it probably was all like unnecessary, but I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to go through no cold turkey withdrawal, and I wanted people to see um, what I have to live like, so I could maybe get some kind of help. I figured I can get help that way because it's going to be in a hospital. They can have other doctors come in and see me. So that's how I got referred to Dr. Felden, who doesn't believe I have CRPS and put me through the bone scan. Said it was inconclusive and wants to put me on gabapentin, which I was on previously, which I can get easily from my primary care provider. So the only way that plan worked is no withdrawal. But then the ironic part of that is after I came out of the hospital, they fucked up my prescription, and I went through 48 to 50 hours of cold turkey, which my cop friend saved my ass because I called him and I told this story before, but in for a penny, in for a pound, in for a ton in this case. Uh, I told him I, I'm out of that medication. And he's like, I'm going through like withdrawal, and I can't get him to give me the medication. He goes like, let me call you in the morning, and in case I need to call the doctor for you. And I was like, why would you need to call the doctor? He's an experienced dude, and he kind of chuckled, and he said, you don't know what you're going to be like in the morning, Steve. He's like, I'm going to call you 9 o'clock on the dot. When's your doctor's open? I'm like, 9 o'clock. He said, I'm going to call you 9 o'clock on the dot, and make sure you're all right. That's a friend. That's somebody that has your back. And then it was the worst part of the winter around here. This is January. Freezing out. The roads were bad and stuff. And then once I called the doctor, and at first I was like, fuck the doctor, because I was in withdrawal, and I was like, man, I was seething. And I was like, man, I'd just like white knuckle my way through this, But I got arrhythmia, I got a bad heart, I got CRPS, I got compromised health. It's like that stuff kills healthy people, cold turkey. And but he was like, calm down, just think about it for a half an hour. I'm gonna call you back. Just calm down, because I'm like, I don't even want to call him. I said, I don't want to call him. It's gonna go one of two ways. So I'm either gonna lose my shit on the phone, and they're gonna hang up on me. Or they're not gonna listen to me again. They're not gonna listen to. I was freaking out, of course. He's like, calm down. I'm gonna call you back in a half an hour. And then like, I thought about it, and before he even called me back, I called the doctor's office, and they said, oh, we had that prescription ready for you yesterday. And I was like, okay, well, I'll send somebody in there to pick it up. And then I put the phone down. I was like, you motherfuckers, man. And I just went off swearing. I'm surprised I didn't break the phone and throw the phone against the wall, because they put me through a hellish night of full cold turkey withdrawal when they had the pills ready for me, but somebody in the office slipped up and didn't call me and tell me that the prescription was ready. And so you can blame the office. The drugstore you can't blame, because the drugstore would not make that call and say, your prescription is ready at that time of day. So I don't blame the drugstore. I blame them. They should have called me and said that, your prescription's ready. You need to pick it up. Because when I had my little taste of withdrawal before, the nurse was very concerned when I talked to her. And she's like, how many hours have you been off of the medication? And I'm like, oh, it's about 16 hours. And she said, why don't you come in here at 5 o'clock? And I'm like, don't you close at 5 o'clock? And she said, we're going to stay open just for you. And kind of laughed. And I saw the doctor for like 10 minutes. He told me to hold my hands out. And he said, not too bad. But my hands were all like vasoconstricted. And it was aggravating the CRPS, because CRPS is about nerve control and vascular constriction and vessel spasms and all that cute stuff in the video link. And but he's like, oh, you're not doing too bad. And then he doubled down on my dose and gave me twice as much and got me in twice as deep, which was just, I didn't ask for that, but that's what he did. So yeah, whatever. But my true friend um, had that stuff to me um, by noon, and he lives in a different city, and he come here by noon, and the guy's doing me a favor, and I'm like, all I want is to take like 3 of those things and get that fucking poison back in my body. And my hands were shaking at that point, like shaking. I got the shakes, like I'm sick. So I said, what do I look like? Do I look as bad as I feel? And he goes, not really. So I really have a problem making an impression when I'm not feeling well. If you're cold turkey 50 hours off of Xanax, and you just kind of look normal to people, and you look calm and composed, it's like, yeah. But he wanted to talk a little bit, and he just did me this gigantic favor. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not taking them pills in front of him. Let him talk. I'm not gonna reach my shaky hands out, and dry swallow like three of them fucking things. I'm not doing that. So I listened to him talk for a half an hour to 40 minutes, and after he left, I opened the bottle and I took two of them. And I didn't feel okay until like the second or third dose, and then I started to feel like it's almost like the first two pills um, just got it to the point where I could eat something, and then it took a couple doses before I felt like a human being again. But somebody does something like that for you, where they're looking out for you like that. I think you owe them for the rest of your life. There's nothing I can do for that guy though. If there was ever anything I could do for that guy, I would do it. But yeah, that would be my. Hey, if there's ever anything wrong with you, man, don't be some. It was just the way I was conditioned as a child. It had nothing to do with me being macho or not wanting to act like a tough guy. You be quiet, stomach. We're not done. You're interrupting our conversation here. Shut up. Don't act like a tough guy, man. If you're you know tell them you got a problem, because it might be something serious. If you got pain, man, make an impression. Do whatever you have to do to make an impression with the medical people. With me, it wasn't a matter of me like showing people how tough I was, because actually my opinion of myself was that I was a coward. Um, had nothing to do with that. It was just the way it was, my conditioning from the way I was raised, because uh, like the way my father was. It's like I didn't want to draw. I had a weird situation. I didn't want good attention. I didn't want bad attention. I didn't want no attention. That's why it's so weird to me to be on the internet, and that's why I don't like. You know, you get unadulterated Steve. I'm not here to like win people over. I'm not here to like uh, get money, to get subscriptions, to get anything, because I don't know. I guess going through all that stuff, you feel like it's gotta be worth something. So at least it's worth a story. At least it's something interesting. It's a life that um, might be interesting to people to hear. It's like I was aware I could have been doing this shit for years. You know, I started it in desperation because of the benzo stuff and some of the emotional stuff that I was going through, and like I was starting to get overwhelmed by the CRPS and the family stuff, and then I had the benzo thing to deal with. That's why I started like this, all this chatter here. But the first times that I went on the internet, like I said before, was just because some guy was saying you're not a writer, and I'm like, well, you should at least hear something that I wrote before you say that. I was, he's like, you've never been published. You should quit calling yourself a writer. And I'm like, was the manuscript for Carrie that his wife dug out of the garbage? Was he not a writer then? And he was only a writer after he got the validation of other people and got money and got paid for it. Are you a basketball player because you get paid for it, or are you a basketball player because you're out there playing basketball? A writer is a writer. A guy that's going to the Y and playing basketball all the time is a basketball player. Um, so, that was my logic behind it. And that's why I made the first, I actually bought a camera because I was using a desktop then, not a handy little laptop. I bought a camera and made a couple of videos. And I said, hey, this is kind of amusing, you know. But I don't have an ending for you other than to tell you, um, if you got a problem, make that impression. However you got to make it. Cry, plead, whine, pound on doors. You got to be persistent when you got a health problem. Because if you're a stoic like me, you can end up uh, in some really bad situation. And I would call this ending with a fizzle. So, not a boom. All right. God bless and good fortune to all you people. And anybody that made it through this far, I hope I made you an entertaining movie or one man play. So, um, you'll be hearing from me again because my life is just like that. Stuff happens. And sometimes it's interesting stuff. And I'm just kind of used to it now. This is kind of my coping mechanism is talking to people, very few of whom's names I know. And um, yeah, I mean, all you got's your story. You might as well tell it. And if your story involves walking into a place and having your pants fall down, or um, blowing a load in your pants over some cheerleader in high school, man, what are you keeping that stuff secret for, man? That's the fun stuff. There, that's an ending. Goodbye.